Where the ocean meets the land, nature often leaves behind some patterns that look almost unreal. Huge networks of crescents, mazes of islands, and jagged ribbons of fjords. Coastlines so complex they resemble works of art. Today we're going to take a look at 20 of the strangest coastlines in the world. Number 20. The Bay of Fundy, Canada. The Bay of Fundy is located between the Canadian provinces of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. It's best known for its record-setting tides. Twice a day, the water level in the bay rises and falls by as much as 16 meters, over 50 feet in some areas. This is the largest tidal range on the planet. This action has created a coastline unlike any other, with a constantly shifting pattern of cliffs, sea stacks, mud flats, and tidal channels. The bay itself is funnel-shaped. It amplifies the tidal effect. As the water flows into the bay from the Atlantic, it gets squeezed into a smaller space, which causes the tides to rise. One cool feature, sometimes called the Flower Pot Rocks or Hopewell Rocks, these are tall sea stacks that were sculpted from sandstone that appear to rise from the ocean floor. At high tide, they're partially submerged, while at low tide, visitors can walk on the seabed around them. This sort of daily transformation makes the coastline look dramatically different depending on the hour. The tidal action has carved these unique tidal bore rivers, such as the Shubenacadie River. When the tide comes in, the water surges upriver in a visible wave. This phenomenon only happens in a handful of places around the world, making the Bay of Fundy coastline especially unusual. The mudflats are rich feeding grounds for migratory birds too, and the waters here attract whales, including humpbacks. The bay is not only a natural wonder, it's kind of like a scientific laboratory. Researchers here study the tidal mechanics to better understand coastal erosion. These patterns here are not just visually strange, they're a window into the dynamics of the Earth. Number 19. The Curonian Spit, Lithuania and Russia. The Curonian Spit is a long sand dune peninsula that separates the Curonian Lagoon from the Baltic Sea. It goes on for about 61 miles, and it's shared by Lithuania and Russia's Kaliningrad region. Now, this unusual geography makes it a very distinctive coastline. At its narrowest point, the spit is only about 400 meters wide, while at its widest, it reaches about 4 kilometers. It was formed by the movement of sand through wind and currents over thousands of years, and today it remains a dynamic landscape. The coastline here is marked by these massive sand dunes, some of the highest in Europe. The Parnaitis Dune near Nida in Lithuania goes up for more than 50 meters, and it's still shifting. These dunes form patterns that are visible both from the ground and from the air, with ridges and valleys that are shaped by the wind. Human intervention, though, has also left its mark. In the 19th century, large-scale reforestation projects were carried out here to stabilize the dunes, which has been destabilized by overgrazing and logging. Pine forests now cover much of the spit, which contrasts with the open sand dunes. That blend of forest and shifting sand creates a coastline with natural and human influence patterns. It's home to fishing villages and wooden architecture, and its history includes settlement of Baltics, Germans, and Russian communities. It's also designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, and from the perspective of coastal science, the Curonian Spit is an example of how wind, water, and human activity interact to create these unusual landforms. The long, narrow shape and ever-changing dunes give it a coastline that's strange compared to the more typical sandy beaches found elsewhere. Number 18. The Dalmatian Coast in Croatia. Along the eastern Adriatic Sea, the Dalmatian coast of Croatia is famous for its beauty. But it is also one of the most unusual in Europe because of its fractured island-dotted pattern. Instead of a smooth shoreline, the coast is broken up into countless narrow channels and islets and elongated islands that run parallel to the mainland. This sort of distinctive geography is where the term Dalmatian coastline originates in geomorphology. It describes the coastline where ridges and valleys, once part of the mainland, are submerged by the ocean, leaving behind long, thin islands. The region is part of the Dinaric Alps, which run parallel to the shore, and over millions of years, tectonic activity has uplifted and folded these rocks into ridges and valleys. When the sea levels rose after the last ice age, the valleys were flooded while the ridges remained above water, and the result is today's strange arrangement of islands and waterways. There are more than 1,000 islands along the coast here, though only a fraction are inhabited. The largest include Brac, Hvar, and Korčula, each separated from the mainland by channels that often look more like rivers than parts of the sea. And from the air, the coast appears like stripes of land and water that stretch side by side. These narrow channels here create sheltered waters that are ideal for navigation, which made this coast a hub of trade and settlement in ancient times. Greek colonists, Romans, Venetians, and Ottomans all left their mark on the islands, and today the same features that once made it a strategic location have turned it into one of the most popular tourist regions. The Curonian Archipelago, part of the Dalmatian Coast, is sometimes described as nautical paradise because of this number of tiny little rocky islands that are clustered together. And from a scientific perspective, the coast is an example of a submergent coastline, where rising sea levels will flood existing landforms. The repeating island and channel pattern makes it one of the clearest illustrations anywhere in the world. The combination of geology and history is what sets this coastline apart. Number 17. The hexagonal basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway. On the north coast of Northern Ireland, the Giant's Causeway is one of the most distinctive formations on the planet. Unlike sandy beaches, this stretch of shoreline is made up of about 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, many of them hexagonal in shape. They fit together like natural pavement, kind of sloping down into the sea in a pattern that looks too precise to be natural. Around 50 to 60 million years ago, intense volcanic eruptions spread lava across the area. As the lava cooled, it contracted and it cracked. That process is known as columnar jointing, and it created these polygonal shapes, most commonly hexagons. Similar formations do exist in other parts of the world, like Iceland and California, but the scale here of the Giant's Causeway makes it unique. The columns vary in height, some rise up to 12 meters, and they form steps that lead from the cliffs down into the Atlantic, giving the site its name. From above, they create a honeycomb-like pattern across the shoreline, and at low tide the shapes are fully visible. At high tide, waves will crash dramatically over the tops. This site has long fascinated people. It inspired myths and legends, and according to Irish folklore, the causeway was built by the giant Finn MacCool to cross the sea to Scotland. And while the legend adds some cultural richness, the scientific explanation of cooling lava is the true origin. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a National Nature Reserve. For scientists, it serves as an important example of volcanology, while for tourists, its geometric shapes and dramatic coast make it unforgettable. Most coastlines form irregular patterns, but here, the rock appears though it was engineered with tools. The exposure along the coast created a natural geometric puzzle that continues to puzzle and amaze anyone who sees it. Number 16. The lace-like coast of Greenland's fjords. Greenland's coastline. It is one of the most complex, and it resembles lace or fractal patterns when viewed from above. Rather than a smooth outline, the coast is carved into thousands of fjords, bays, peninsulas, and islands, and this irregularity comes from the interaction between ice and rock over millions of years. Glaciers were advancing and retreating during successive ice ages, and they gouged deep valleys into the land, which were later flooded by seawater as the ice melted. The result is a coastline that defies easy measurement. Estimates of Greenland's coastal length vary depending on how finely the curves are measured, but the number's often cited as more than 44,000 kilometers. That's longer than the Earth's circumference. This is because the coastline kind of doubles back on itself so often, with fjords that stretch deep into the land. The fjords themselves form amazing patterns. They're often long, narrow, and steep-sided, running in parallel lines where glaciers once advanced. And many fjords are still home to active tidewater glaciers, which calve icebergs into the sea. And from the air, these fjords appear like claw marks cutting into the island. Some of the world's most famous examples include Scoresby Sund, one of the largest and longest fjord systems in the world, and Elusiat Ice Fjord. Elusiat is particularly striking because of its connection to one of the fastest-moving glaciers on Earth, which fills the fjord with massive icebergs that drift out into the bay. The retreat of some glaciers here has exposed new inlets and bays in recent decades, which has altered the shape of the coast. Satellite images show these changes in detail as new meltwater channels cut into the ice in rocky fjords. Few places on Earth have a shoreline so dominated by glaciers. The interplay of erosion, melting, and calving creates patterns that look chaotic, but they're tied directly into glacial dynamics. Number 15. The dragon-shaped coastline of Halong Bay, Vietnam. Halong Bay in northeastern Vietnam. It's one of the world's most famous coastal landscapes. The bay is known for its thousands of limestone islands, which rise steeply from the emerald waters, which creates a jagged, dragon-like pattern along the coast. The name Halong translates to descending dragon, a reflection of both the local legend and the bay's appearance. Over millions of years, rainwater and groundwater slowly dissolved rock, forming caves, sinkholes, and towers. As the sea levels rose, valleys flooded, leaving behind dramatic pillars and islands. Today, more than 1,600 islands and islets dot the bay, many with cliffs that plunge directly into the water. From above, the bay looks like a maze of waterways that winds its way around the islands, and the channels between them create irregular patterns that are constantly shifting perspective depending on where you view them from. Many islands here are riddled with caves, like Sung Sat, or a surprise cave, and Tien Kung, Heavenly Palace Cave, which continue to develop as water erodes the limestone. This unusual coastline has created sheltered waters that support coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass beds. Culturally, it's inspired myths, art, and of course, literature. According to legend, dragons descended to protect the Vietnamese people from invaders, and their tails carved out the bay's many islands and channels. While the real explanation is in geology, the imagery of dragons remains a fitting metaphor for this twisting, jagged shape. Instead of a clear boundary, the limestone towers here create a labyrinth seascape. To navigate it is to move through a shifting pattern of cliffs and islands that seems more like an elaborate sculpture than a natural formation. Number 14. The Bight of Benin, West Africa. Along the Gulf of Guinea in West Africa is the Bight of Benin, a sweeping curve of a coastline that runs from Ghana in the west to Nigeria in the east. This stretch of shoreline is pretty unusual because of its broad arc and shape, the way the rivers, lagoons, and barrier islands form repeating patterns. Rather than a smooth, sandy coastline, the bight is broken by lagoons and low-lying wetlands. Geographically, it's part of a larger coastal indentation called the Bight of Benin and Bight of Benin system. This arc is the result of long-term coastal erosion, including sediment carried westward by the current from major rivers like the Niger and the Volta. Over time, the settlements built up barrier islands and sand spits. These lagoons formed elongated parallel waterways that were separated from the sea. Some examples include the Lagos Lagoon in Nigeria and the Keta Lagoon in Ghana. From the air, these lagoons and sand barriers give the coastline a striped appearance. In places, they're connected to the sea by narrow channels that will shift over time, which produces a constantly changing shoreline. Historically, the Bight of Benin has a dark reputation. It's once been called the Slave Coast because it was a major departure point during the transatlantic slave trade. Today, it's better known for its fishing communities, ports, and growing cities like Lagos and Cotonou. The coastline's strange patterns have influenced settlement too, as villages and towns often formed along the narrow strips of land. But from a scientific perspective, it shows how coastal sediment and lagoon systems can create these unusual shapes. Rising seas and coastal erosion are already threatening the barrier islands, and for communities living along them, it means the patterns of this coastline may continue to shift dramatically in the coming decades. Number 13. The coast of Tierra del Fuego in Argentina and Chile. At the southern tip of South America lies Tierra del Fuego, an archipelago divided between Argentina and Chile. Its coast is one of the strangest for its maze of channels, fjords, and islands. Instead of a single clear outline, it twists and turns in complex shapes. This pattern is the result of glaciation. During the last ice age, massive glaciers carved deep valleys into the Andes at the continent's southern end. As the ice retreated, the seawater flooded the valleys, producing the coastline of fjords and channels. The Beagle Channel is one of the most famous features. It runs east to west and it cuts between islands, and it also provides a navigable waterway that's long been important for shipping. Further west, the Chilean side of Tierra del Fuego is almost completely broken into fjords and peninsulas. To the east, the Argentine side has fewer fjords but still features a heavily indented coast. The coastline here is also shaped by countless islands, ranging in size from Isla Grande de Tierra del Fuego, the main island, to smaller rocky outcrops, and together they create a fragmented seascape. Cold currents from the Southern Ocean mix with the fresh water from glacial melt, and they produce nutrient-rich waters here that support diverse life. Sea lions, penguins, and whales are common, and the fjords are channels that are surrounded by forests of southern beach. European explorers found the coast difficult to chart. With its many channels and unpredictable weather systems, the name Tierra del Fuego, or Land of Fire, came from early Spanish explorers who saw smoke rising from the indigenous fires along the shore. The intricate fjords and channels here make it kind of comparable to places like Norway or Greenland, but the location at the very tip of South America adds to that sense of strangeness. The snaking, fractured pattern of this coastline is a reminder of how glaciers have reshaped the land, which leave behind coastlines that look almost unnatural. Number 12. The meandering delta coast of the Ganges-Brahmaputra, Bangladesh and India. The coastline that's formed by the Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta, it's one of the strangest on Earth. It's located mainly in Bangladesh, with parts extending into India's West Bengal. It is the largest river delta in the world, and it covers more than 100,000 square kilometers. Instead of a smooth shore, this coastline is a network of tidal channels, sandbars, and mangrove-covered islands. From the air, it's like a lacework that's constantly being redrawn by the rivers and tides. The strange patterns here are the product of immense amounts of sediment carried downstream by the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna rivers. Every year, these rivers deposit hundreds of millions of tons of silt into the bay, and as the sediment shifts, it creates new islands called chars, while others disappear beneath the waves. The Sundarbans, the world's largest mangrove forest, lie at the heart of this coastline. The mangroves here form their own intricate patterns, with tidal creeks branching and rebranching into finer and finer channels. From above, the Sundarbans appear like a green mosaic that have been cut by silver-blue rivers and streams. Villages are built on chars that may vanish within a decade, which does force people to move. Dikes and embankments are constructed to hold back the tidal waters, but storms often breach them, which reshapes the land again. For centuries, people have adapted here to this environment, using boats and seasonal farming to survive. This whole area is just really cool in terms of ecology. It supports Bengal tigers, crocodiles, and hundreds of fish and bird species. The mangroves play a vital role in storing carbon and buffering the effects of any climate change. And at the same time, sea level rise does threaten to alter that coastline further, potentially submerging large areas by the end of the century. The coastline's patterns are temporary, shifting every season, shaped by rivers, tides, and storms. It's a coastline that never looks the same twice. Number 11. The 12 Apostles, Victoria, Australia. Along Australia's southern coast in the state of Victoria, the Great Ocean Road winds past one of the most striking coastlines in the world. It's known as the 12 Apostles. This stretch of shore is famous for its sea stacks. The pattern of cliffs, arches, and stacks creates a fragmented, almost sculpture-like coastline that looks like a natural colonnade standing in the sea. Over millions of years, waves and wind has eroded the limestone, cutting caves into the cliffs, and these caves became arches, and eventually these arches collapsed, leaving behind isolated columns of rock. Today, fewer than 12 stacks remain standing, but the name has persisted. The Apostles are not uniform in size or shape. Some go more than 45 meters above sea level, while others are smaller and narrower. Their arrangement along the coast, too, is irregular, which gives the appearance of scattered sentinels that face the ocean. From the cliffs above, visitors will see a pattern of stacks that are aligned loosely along the shore, separated by waters and pounding surf. In 2005, one of the stacks collapsed, reminding observers that erosion continues to reshape the area. And new stacks may eventually form as more of the cliffs are undercut by waves, but this ongoing process gives the coastline a dynamic quality. The 12 Apostles and surrounding coast are part of Port Campbell National Park, which protects not only the sea stacks, but also other formations like Lockhart Gorge and the London Arch. Together, these sites form one of the most famous natural attractions in Australia. From a scientific perspective, the 12 Apostles show coastal erosion in action. From a cultural perspective, they've become symbols of Australia's natural beauty, featured in tourism campaigns and countless photographs. The repeating pattern of land and sea, permanence and collapse, it gives it fragmented beauty. It shows that coastlines are not fixed boundaries, but shifting, eroding edges that are shaped by time and tide. Number 10. The puzzle-like coast of the Lofoten Islands of Norway. The Lofoten Islands in northern Norway are known for their amazing scenery, but what makes their coastline unusual is the fractured puzzle-like pattern of the fjords, bays, and islands. Stretching out into the Norwegian Sea above the Arctic Circle, the islands form a chain that looks almost like stepping stones that extend from the mainland. These strange shapes are the result of glacial carving. During the last ice age, huge glaciers moved through the valleys of what is now northern Norway, gouging fjords and leaving behind isolated ridges of rock. Each island in the chain has its own distinctive coastline. There are two, for example, that are dominated by towering peaks that rise straight out of the ocean, with narrow strips of flat land along their bases. Ostfagøy, the largest island, contains a labyrinth of fjords and bays that are cut into the land, creating those irregular peninsulas and sheltered harbors. The coastline also features some unusual tidal currents, particularly in the narrow straits between the islands. This natural phenomenon has long been noted in sailors' tales, and it's one of the strongest tidal currents in the world. Fishing villages are scattered along the shores too, and they're often perched on rocky outcrops with houses built on stilts above the water. The coast provides sheltered harbors for boats despite the harsh conditions of the Norwegian Sea, and from the air, the red and white villages stand out against the irregular coastline, which adds to that distinct visual character. For scientists and geographers, Lofoten is a classic example of a drowned glacial landscape. For travelers, it's a coastline with strange beauty because of the way the sharp mountains rise directly from the ocean with no transition, which creates a landscape that seems fragmented and continuous at the same time. Number 9. The ever-changing coastline of the Mississippi River Delta. At the very southern end of the Mississippi River is a coast unlike any other in North America, the Mississippi River Delta. It stretches into the Gulf in Louisiana and is a constantly shifting landscape of wetlands, barrier islands, and river channels. The patterns here are formed by sediment that are carried down by the Mississippi River, and over thousands of years the river has deposited mud and sand at its mouth, gradually building out the delta into the Gulf. The river doesn't stay in one fixed channel. Periodically it does shift its course, it abandons old paths and cuts new ones, and each time this happens, new lobes of land are built. From the air, the delta looks like a series of these overlapping fans or birds' feet maybe, with narrow fingers of land that stretch into the Gulf. That unusual pattern is why one part of the delta is called the Bird's Foot Delta. Other areas show remnants of older delta lobes too, now partially eroded. Storms, floods, and human engineering projects all have reshaped it. Levees built along the Mississippi have reduced the amount of sediment reaching the coast, causing parts of the delta to sink and erode. This instability makes the Mississippi Delta one of the most changeable coastlines on the planet. The environments here, the wetlands and the estuaries, they provide critical storm protection for communities like New Orleans, acting as a buffer against a storm surge, and at the same time, their fragility makes them highly vulnerable to rising sea levels. It is a place where the boundary between land and sea is blurred a bit, with patterns that shift year by year. Number 8. The S-shaped coastline of Brazil's Lençóis Maranhenses region. On the northern coast of Brazil is one of the most unusual stretches of shoreline. The coast here, adjacent to Lençóis Maranhenses National Park, is known for a sweeping S-shaped curve and the striking patterns formed by its sand dunes and lagoons. This coastline owes this unusual geometry to the interaction of sediment, currents, and wind. The strong equatorial trade winds push sand inland from the Atlantic, while tidal forces and seasonal rains rearrange it. And over time, this created an immense field of white dunes, which some rise over 40 meters high. These dunes can extend inland for more than 40 kilometers, but they begin at the coast, where the shoreline bends in a pronounced S-curve. From above, it looks like the land is kind of flowing like liquid out into the sea. During the rainy season, the fresh water will collect between the dunes, and it forms these thousands of lagoons. They're filled with rainwater, but separated from the ocean by the dunes, and they create a patchwork of blue and green pools against the white sand. The result is a shoreline that's unlike any other, where the boundary between sea and land is blurred into a changing mosaic of sand, water, and light. Satellite imagery shows the curves moving over time, with new sandbars forming and old ones being eroded. The large curve, however, has persisted, created by a long-term sediment deposition and wave refraction across the coast. Human communities have lived on the fringes of this coastline, mostly in small villages, and their livelihoods depend on navigating these sands, fishing in the lagoons and the coastal waters, and harvesting resources from mangroves. This is a coastline that's defined by constant motion. Unlike rocky shores that remain relatively fixed, this coast is a living landscape, reshaped each year by the same forces that created it. Number 7. The maze-like coast of the Stockholm Archipelago in Sweden. The Stockholm Archipelago, which stretches out from Sweden's capital city into the Baltic Sea, forms one of the most complex coastlines in Europe. Instead of a single clear edge, this coast consists of about 30,000 islands, islets, and skerries that are scattered across it, forming an intricate maze. From above, it looks less like a traditional coastline and more like shattered glass. What makes it particularly strange isn't just the number of islands, but their arrangement. Many islands are elongated in shape, they're aligned in parallel with each other. That reflects the direction of glacial movement, which carved grooves into the landscapes. From above, you can see the geological fingerprints of the Ice Age that are preserved in the layout of the islands themselves. But the coastline here is also dynamic in a slower way. Due to a process called isostatic rebound, the land is still rising after being freed from the weight of the ice. And as the land rises, new islands will emerge and old ones expand. This process adds to the sense of the coastline that's constantly evolving. Fishing and small-scale farming sustained communities here for centuries, and today many Swedes maintain summer cottages on the islands. Despite its proximity to Stockholm, though, the archipelago has a sense of remoteness. Navigating the water still requires skill, as the channels twist and turn unpredictably between the islands. From a scientific view, the archipelago is an excellent example of a drowned glacial landscape, much like the fjord systems of Norway, but on a smaller, more fragmented scale. Few places in the world have so many islands that are concentrated in one area. The coastline here isn't a line, it's a field, spread out into the sea in a bewildering pattern that is at once natural and geometric. It's a coastline that changes the very idea of what a coastline is supposed to look like, replacing a simple boundary with a labyrinth of land and water. Number 6. The braided coastline of Alaska's Glacier Bay. Alaska's Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve. It's one of the most extraordinary coastlines on the planet. It stretches across southeastern Alaska and contains more than 5,000 square kilometers of fjords, inlets, and tidewater glaciers. Instead of a smooth line, Glacier Bay's coast resembles a spiderweb of waterways that cuts through mountains, with glaciers pouring into the sea and constantly redrawing the edges of the land. The story of Glacier Bay begins only about 250 years ago, when a massive sheet of ice filled what is now the bay, and in the late 18th century when explorer George Vancouver mapped the region, the glacier extended almost all the way to the mouth of the bay. By the mid-19th century, however, the glacier began retreating, and over the following century it pulled back more than 100 kilometers. It's one of the fastest glacial retreats ever recorded. As it vanished, it revealed a complex system of fjords, islands, and inlets. The coastline here is not static, it's still being reshaped as the glacier continues to retreat. The resulting coastline looks braided, like long fjords running parallel to each other, separated by sharp ridges of rock. The edges are marked by moraines, ridges of rock and sediment left behind, which form small islands or underwater shoals. Today, the bay is a major draw for researchers and visitors. Scientists study the rapid transformation to better understand climate change and glacial dynamics, while tourists arrive by cruise ship or kayak to see the spectacle of ice meeting ocean. The shoreline you see today didn't exist a century ago, and a century from now, it will almost certainly look different again. Number 5. The fractal-like coastline of Maine. The coast of the state of Maine in the northeastern United States is often called rock-bound or jagged, but those terms hardly capture its complexity. Stretching for only about 230 miles in a straight line, Maine's actual coastline, when measured in detail, extends for more than 3,500 miles. The reason is its strange fractal-like pattern. Instead of a simple curve, the coast is riddled with peninsulas, coves, and islands. From the air, it looks like lacework, with countless indentations and projections. Large peninsulas like the Boothby or Mount Desert Island area are cut by smaller coves and inlets, which are themselves indented by tidal creeks and salt marshes. This repeating irregularity gives the coastline a fractal-like quality, where zooming in reveals more detail rather than less. Mathematicians have often used Maine's coast as an example in discussion of the coastline paradox, the idea that the length of a coastline depends on how closely you measure it, because smaller and smaller features keep adding length. One striking area is Acadia National Park on Mount Desert Island. Here, granite cliffs drop directly into the sea. The island itself is surrounded by dozens of smaller ones, each with its own irregular shoreline. Penobscot Bay, further northeast, contains more than 200 islands, forming a maze of waterways that's challenged sailors for centuries. And the tides here add another layer of strangeness. Maine's coast experiences tidal ranges of up to 20 feet, which expose mudflats, salt marshes, and rocky outcrops at low tide. Its coastline has shaped Maine's identity. Its countless harbors and inlets have made it ideal for fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. Towns like Portland, Camden, and Bar Harbor developed around these sheltered waters. Lighthouses mark rocky headlands to guide ships through a maze of islands and shoals, and for artists and writers, this coast has long been a source of inspiration. From a scientific standpoint, its coast is a textbook example of a drowned glacial coastline. Unlike straight sandy beaches, Maine's is strange because of its overwhelming complexity. It's a coastline that just refuses to simplify itself into a neat line. Instead, it sprawls into thousands of inlets, islands, and coves. Maine's fractal coast is one of the clearest examples anywhere of how nature can create patterns that are both chaotic and ordered. It's baffling and beautiful. Number 4. The ribbon-like coastline of Chile's fjords. Chile's southern coast is one of the most extraordinary stretches of shoreline in the world. It extends for thousands of kilometers from Puerto Montt in the north down to Cape Horn at the continent's tip. Instead of one clean outline, the coast unravels into these endless strips of land and sea. The Strait of Magellan here is one of the most famous features in this region, a natural channel that cuts between the mainland and Tierra del Fuego. But it's just one of hundreds of such passages, most of which are less well known but equally remarkable. The Messier Channel, for example, runs more than 500 kilometers, which are bordered by cliffs and glaciers that tumble into the sea. Alongside it are countless smaller inlets where glaciers still calve icebergs into the water. From above, the coast looks ribbon-like because of the long, narrow shape of these fjords and the channels. Parallel ridges of the Andes create long strips of land separated by equally long strips of water, and that produces a repeating pattern, land, water, that stretches out into the horizon. Today, the region's barely populated, with only small towns and fishing villages that are scattered around the coast. For navigation, though, the fjord system has been vital. Sailors have used this area and the protected channels as alternatives to rounding Cape Horn, which is notoriously dangerous. The Chilean Navy still maintains a strong presence in the region, which ensures safe passage through what is effectively one of the longest natural shipping lanes in the world. This makes Chile's coast kind of like Alaska's Glacier Bay, one of the few coastlines in the world where large-scale process can be witnessed in real time. Other countries like Norway also have fjords, but nowhere are they as extensive and labyrinthine as those in southern Chile. Its ribbon-like pattern stretches for more than 1,600 kilometers, creating one of the most fractured coastlines on Earth. Number 3. Horseshoe Bay, Bermuda. The island of Bermuda offers a coastline that's strange for a different reason. Horseshoe Bay on Bermuda's south shore is one of the best-known examples of a natural horseshoe-shaped coastline. Now, unlike the fjords of Chile or the fractal coast of Maine, this shore forms nearly a perfect arc, bending around in a crescent that almost looks artificial. What makes this one unusual is its color. Bermuda's famous for its pink sand beaches caused by tiny fragments of coral and shells that are mixed into the sand. At Horseshoe Bay, the pink hue adds to this surreal appearance. From above, the combination of pink beach and turquoise water, it creates an amazing pattern that's recognized around the world. The headlands that frame the bay are also distinctive. They're made of eroded limestone, which forms ridges and outcrops that jut into the sea. Now, these rocks not only protect the bay from the full force of the Atlantic, but also create smaller coves and inlets around the edges. For Bermuda's people and their economy, Horseshoe Bay is iconic. It's one of the island's most visited beaches, and it draws tourists from all over the world. Cruise ship passengers in particular often flock to the bay to see this unusual color. Its popularity has made it a cultural symbol of Bermuda. In fact, it's featured in countless travel photographs and postcards. Yet, despite its fame, it's also pretty fragile. Rising sea levels and stronger storms are threatening to erode the sand. And like many coastlines, Horseshoe Bay is dynamic, and its patterns are not fixed forever. Conservation efforts, including reef protection and careful beach management, are key to preserving it. While most coasts form jagged or irregular lines, here the forces of erosion and deposition combine to produce a near-perfect arc. Among the world's strange coastlines, Horseshoe Bay stands out, not for its complexity, but for its simplicity, a single sweeping curve carved into pink sand and limestone. Number 2. Mont Saint-Michel Bay in France. On the border of Normandy and Brittany lies Mont Saint-Michel Bay. It's one of the strangest coastlines in Europe. It's famous for the tidal island that's topped with a medieval abbey, but the bay itself is remarkable for its crescent shape. It's a place where the coastline isn't fixed, but it shifts dramatically throughout the day, creating unusual and ever-changing patterns. The bay owes that crescent shape to the natural dynamics of sediment and tides in the English Channel. Powerful currents sweep in and out, which deposit silt and sand in a broad arc. From the air, that curve is striking. A pale band of sediment and mudflats outlines the bay like a crescent moon, with the abbey standing at the center. The arc is accentuated by the surrounding headlands, which frame the bay and create a natural amphitheater for the tides. The difference between high and low tide here can exceed 14 meters, and the water retreats so far that at low tide, huge mudflats stretch onto the horizon. The patterns created by this daily transformation are extraordinary. Channels snake across the mudflats in shifting positions as the tide erodes and deposits settlement. Sandbanks emerge and disappear, and the coastline is effectively rewritten every 12 hours. There is aquaculture here, and it's become an important part of the bay's cultural identity. The strange shape combined with the tidal extremes make it one of the most productive marine ecosystems in France. It's got a long human history too, shaped by this geography. Mont Saint-Michel itself was built in the 8th century on that rocky island. It was easy to defend because of the tides. Pilgrims and visitors were forced to time their journeys carefully to avoid being trapped by the rising water. Even today, crossing the bay on foot is pretty dangerous without a guide because the tides come in quickly and the mudflats contain areas of quicksand. In recent years, large restoration projects have been undertaken to prevent the bay from silting up completely. For centuries, land reclamation projects and a causeway encouraged silt to build up, which did threaten to permanently connect the island to the mainland, but engineers have since redesigned the causeway and altered river channels to restore the tidal flow, ensuring that the bay retains its distinctive patterns. Most coastlines shift over the centuries, but here, the transformation is visible every day as the sea races in and races out, creating a coastline that's crescent-shaped and endlessly variable. Number 1. The Great Barrier Reef coastline of Australia. Stretching along the northeastern coast of Australia, the Great Barrier Reef forms the largest living structure on Earth and one of the strangest coastlines anywhere. Unlike rocky cliffs or sandy beaches, this coastline is defined not by solid land, but by coral reefs, over 2,900 of them, scattered across 2,300 kilometers. From space, the reef looks like a mosaic of turquoise and green patches that outline the Queensland coast in a pattern that has no parallel in the world. The coastline is unusual here not because it's a single straight line. Instead, it's a vast zone, up to 250 kilometers wide in some places, where reefs, lagoons, and islands create a shifting boundary. Over millions of years, these structures have accumulated into reefs, which grew upward and outward, and the result is a coastline that looks fractured. From above, the patterns are mesmerizing. Some reefs are long and ribbon-like, running parallel to the shore, and others are circular, forming atolls with lagoons in the center. Unlike a typical coast, which is defined by land erosion, the Great Barrier Reef's coastline is built by living organisms, making it fragile and dynamic. The reef provides habitat for more than 1,500 species of fish, 400 types of coral, and countless invertebrates. Sea turtles nest on the sandy keys, while dugongs graze on seagrass beds. Migratory whales pass through the reef on their journeys, and the strange patterns of the reefs, the barriers and lagoons, create niches for different species. Culturally, the reef has been central to the Torres Strait Islander people for thousands of years. Its islands and waters hold spiritual significance. In the modern era, the reef has become one of Australia's most important destinations for tourism, attracting millions of people each year. And scientifically, of course, the Great Barrier Reef is a natural laboratory. It shows how reefs grow and how they respond to changes in sea level. In recent decades, however, it's also become a focus of concern. Rising ocean temperatures have caused mass coral bleaching events, which threatens the health of the reef. Cyclones and pollution add further stress. But what makes it stand out among the world's strange coasts is the scale and its origin. It's not carved by ice or by waves, but constructed by life itself. Unlike other coastlines, which retreat under erosion, the Great Barrier Reef has the capacity to build outward, creating new landform over time. From above, the Great Barrier Reef doesn't look like a single coastline. It looks like a galaxy of reefs, each with its own shape, orbiting the continent of Australia. It is one of the few coastlines that can be seen clearly from space, and its beauty continues to astonish both scientists and visitors. Among the world's coastlines, it is perhaps the strangest, a living, growing edge of the continent that blurs the line between land and sea.